Welcome to this exciting event, Changing the Food System One Meal at a Time. And we are very many, and that's why we chose for this webinar format. This is maybe a less interactive format, as you'll see only the panelists or the speakers. You are not visible, but it allows us to have many people joining and also having you join in large groups without being very disturbing in terms of sound to the rest of people. The event tonight is organized by the World Food Systems Center. I'll be your host. My name is Monica Piesens. I work as an education manager at the World Food Systems Center. And with this fantastic headset, I'll be your pilot today. So the World Food Systems Center is a competency center of the ETH Zürich. We bring together research, education, and outreach activities to foster sustainable food systems and knowledge on sustainable food systems. It is the first time we organize such an event, actually, online. Um, it is the first time that we organize such a cooking show. And bear with us if there is any issues. I'm sure we have many things to learn. And if you have any feedback to us, let us know as well, either during the event or afterwards. We'll ask you for feedback as well. Today is really about getting you a taste of what sustainable cooking is about and how you as a consumer can contribute to sustainable food systems. We only have 2 hours, which is very, very short. And we have a lot to go through. As you see, we are a few panelists. We are in total 6 people giving a contribution. And in the end, you're also really cooking, and we need enough time for that. Thank you also for your questions in advance. There's been really a lot of very good questions, very broad questions. We unfortunately cannot cover all, but the speakers we are can give you a bit of a glimpse on what challenges the food system is facing today, and as well looking into the social and the environmental aspects of sustainable food systems. So I would love you to look at the bottom of this slide. You'll see a logo salad of numerous partners actually that joined us to organize this event today. A few are presenting today, and a few I'd like to specially mention. So Jamila from the from the Student Sustainability Commission really helped us in the setup of the event. She gave us kind of the student perspective, and she'll be the photographer today. The event is generously funded by the Mercator Foundation Switzerland. And we have an invisible Zoom moderator, but his name is David, and he is there to help you with any technical issues. So if you have any challenges, you can write them in the chat, and he'll help you to make sure you can join us as well as possible. Then I'd like to share the agenda for today. And we have a lot to go through, but a lot of fun stuff. So the first 30 minutes are really about getting a sense for the topic today, which is sustainable food systems. Michelle Grant from the World Food Systems Center will start with an introduction into food systems. Then we'll continue with Lynn Borgen-Nielsen from NADEL, also from the ETH, who will highlight a bit the social aspect of sustainable consumption. The next food for thought will come from Akanksha Singh from the Agroecology department at ETH, and she will highlight environmental sustainability and intercropping. And this is the first half an hour. Afterwards, we'll really get your hands dirty and actually start cooking under the very capable guidance of Susan Tobler from TASTELAB. And during that time, there is time to ask any questions you have during this hour and a half. We will stay on Zoom always to answer all these questions while you're cooking. And just before we end the Zoom, so at 5 to 8, we will come back with the mindful eating exercise. So it's a chance to really have a little exercise before you're eating. And then you can continue cooking. If you're a big group, you might still be cooking. And then enjoy your meal with this exercise. Also, another final note, the meal is regional and seasonal to Switzerland. As we saw, some are joining from Australia or other parts of the world. So you might need to replace some ingredients to make it more regional and seasonal to your time zone and to your region. And a final guidance on the actual Zoom. For those of you maybe less familiar with the webinar format, you will see two ways. So you see a chat where you can chat with each other, and you have a Q&A button. If you have any questions to the contributors, I'd really love you to ask those on the Q&A, just because then we're really able to make sure the right person answers the right question and everyone can see which question has been answered. The chat is really a chance for us to share information with you, or in case you experience any technical challenges, you can upload them there. All right, so that was all an introduction for me. And I hand over to Michelle Grant, who will give you an introduction into food systems. There you go. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Thanks a lot, Monica, and hi, everybody. I'll just have to ask you to bear with me for a moment while I share my screen. I guess you've all been using Zoom enough to know that that always takes a moment or two. Okay, and there we are. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you all tonight, and it feels like an honor actually to be with you inside your kitchen, which is my favorite part of the house and where the most exciting cooking is going to happen tonight. So it's really great to be here with you. And as Monica said, we're just going to give you a bit of food for thought, an appetizer, if you will, to sort of warm you up and get you thinking a little bit before we dive into the cooking. And to start, I thought it would be nice to just take a look around at all these beautiful ingredients that you have maybe in front of you on the table, ready to be prepared. And to take a moment to think about where that food actually came from. And I'm sure that no matter what ingredient you're looking at, it began its life on a farm somewhere in some part of the world. It was a part of some sort of agricultural production system. And maybe there's a few of you who actually grew your own potatoes or grew your own carrots, but I'm guessing many of you actually got a lot of the ingredients from perhaps a market or a supermarket. And so many of your ingredients, after they went through a process of growing on the farm, maybe went through some sort of a processing, they were transported, they were stored, they were stacked on shelves in a market or a supermarket before you bought them and put them on your table, ready to be cooked and eventually to make their way into your stomach, which is not where the story ends, because afterwards there's of course some sort of a physiological response that your body has to the food that you put inside of it. And that might be for better or for worse, depending on what you're choosing to eat. But tonight we have a pretty healthy menu for you, so that's likely to be a good response. And in all of these different steps that happen to get that food into your kitchen, all along the way, we needed all kinds of resources. We needed soil and seeds and water and the efforts of people in the field to grow the food. And then we needed energy and water and other inputs the whole way through this value chain to make this food end up on your table. And this is a bit of a sad part of the story because, as many of you probably know, despite having to use all these resources to create our food, we waste or lose around 30 to 50% of all the food in the world. Maybe it's left rotting in the field because there's not adequate infrastructure to reach markets, or perhaps it's left rotting at the back of your fridge because life got too busy this week and you forgot about that poor lettuce that's wilting somewhere in the back of the refrigerator. And all of these different steps that we need to do to bring that food into our homes are influenced by a lot of things that often we don't even see or don't necessarily think about. So for example, the climate or the soil, which might determine what types of things can be grown where, or social conditions like what sort of food is popular to eat where you live right now, or what sort of food is culturally acceptable or desirable. Then there's the political conditions. What sort of policies are in place which incentivize or disincentivize us to produce food and consume food in certain ways? And then, of course, there's economic conditions, the prices of food, which may or may not actually include the true costs of the food. And of course, the price plays a really big role in shaping what sort of food is produced and what sort of food is consumed around the world. And all of these different steps that we need to go through are actually only possible because of literally billions of people who work each day to make our food, to produce our food and to bring it onto our plates. And I think this is such an important part of our food system, which in my opinion just doesn't get enough attention. And isn't really appreciated as it should be. The faces of our food system are really the people behind the meal that we're going to eat tonight, who we often don't spend much time thinking about. They might have worked hard in the field to grow that carrot, or they might have stacked the shelves with your buckwheat flour, or perhaps cooked some of the ingredients that are pre-prepared, or drove or stacked those trucks that brought the food to us. And all of these people in this system and all of these steps that we looked at are not as nice and linear and square as you see in this picture, but it's actually a really complex and interconnected network of systems and subsystems that stretches all the way across the globe. And when we think about these elements of the food system, they might be interesting on their own, but why we're really interested in them is because we want to know, how does this all work together to give us the outcomes that we're looking for from this system? And what are these outcomes? Well, first of all, we would love it if our food system enabled everyone on the planet to get the healthy food that they need, that they had food and nutrition security, and that this was the case for everybody on the planet. The other outcome that we would love is that the people who are involved in producing our food, the people in this system, are able to earn enough that they themselves have the sustainable livelihood and that they themselves can nourish and feed their own families. And finally, we would really love it if this system didn't degrade the resource and ecosystem basis, which we basically need to produce food today and into the future. And if we look at these outcomes, if we're able to achieve these outcomes from our food system, then that's what would make a food system truly sustainable. And the bad news, I guess, is that we're kind of quite far from achieving these outcomes if we look at where we stand in the world today. So just to give you a bit of an idea for these three different outcomes, how it looks today. If we consider food and nutrition security, well, the story doesn't start very well, because there's around 700 million people on the planet today. That's around 9% of our global population, who go to bed hungry each night. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And that is heartbreaking and tragic on its own. But the story becomes worse when we think about people who might get enough food in terms of quantity or calories, but that food doesn't have the micronutrients, the vitamins, and the minerals that they need to live a healthy life. And so when we look at these types of hunger together, we come to realize that over 2 billion people in the world are suffering from one of these forms of malnutrition. 2 billion people, that's a quarter of our global population. And if that's not bad enough, then we can also start to consider the epidemic of overweight and obesity that we're facing in the world today. And if we look at both the individual and the societal burden of these different forms of malnutrition, that's bad enough on its own, and it helps us to understand why actually 1 in 5 deaths globally are linked to unhealthy diets. So when we look at all of these huge figures, we start to realize that we're really far away from where we want to be in terms of our food system delivering on its most, I don't want to say most important, but its primary outcome of feeding and nourishing us. And how does that link then to the second outcome that I mentioned before, social well-being? Well, if we think for a moment again about some of the faces behind our food, some of the people involved in, let's say, harvesting celery in the fields here in Salinas Valley in California, or processing chicken in the world's biggest chicken processing facility in Brazil. What we know about a lot of the jobs in the food system, not all, but many, is that the working conditions are difficult. It's a lot of manual labor, sometimes extreme heat, extreme cold. Often the pay is very poor, and often the conditions or the benefits associated with the job are either not present or not where they should be. And so it's maybe then not surprising, though still, I think, one of the most disturbing paradoxes in the food system, that it's actually the people involved in producing our food for a living who are more likely to be malnourished compared to people working in any other sector. And that, I think, is really something we need to pay much more attention to. Why is it that the very people that work to nourish us are not able to nourish themselves and their families how they should be able to? And then this final outcome of environmental sustainability. I'm really sorry if you're hoping for some good news here, but I think you kind of know what's coming here. And that's the fact that our food system is responsible for over 30% of greenhouse gas emissions, and a huge portion of that comes from animal agriculture. Our food system is also the largest driver of biodiversity loss globally. And it's also the biggest user of our freshwater resources. Around 70% or more of our freshwater resources are utilized to produce the food that we eat. And when we look at all of these different things together, we see that actually, of all human activities, food production has the largest impact on our natural environment. So compared to transportation or the energy sector, the impact of food is much, much more significant. Now, that is all difficult to digest and not good news. But I think that the silver lining that comes out of this is that we begin to realize that food is actually the major lever that we have to tackle many of the global challenges that we face, many of these big pressing challenges which have been outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals. We can connect food and agriculture to all 17 of these goals. And because all of these goals are so urgent and so pressing, the good news is that as eaters and as people who are lucky enough to have 3 meals a day, there's a concrete opportunity for us to engage with creating change every single day. And so what does that look like? Well, it can start with each of us. And that's, I think, the good news that we're really trying to help you engage with tonight. It can start with each of us as individuals. We can look at how we eat, how we buy, how we engage with this food system. And I think it's very important that we don't stop there, because if we want to really change and really transition this food system to one that is sustainable and that delivers these outcomes, we need to have collective action at a large scale that changes things at a systems level. And I think that it's important for all of us to think about what our role could be here as well. But let's start with individually, what we're also going to engage with our cooking tonight. Changing the food system can start on every single plate that's in front of you. Maybe some of you heard about the Eat Lancet report, which came out in 2019. And what they did is try and outline a planetary health diet, a global reference diet, which could be supportive of both human health and environmental health. So people, helping people and planet. And what you see very quickly with the recommended plate here is that it's very plant forward. So most of the food on the plate is either vegetables, whole grains, plant sourced protein, and then animal sourced foods are only forming a very small portion of the meals. Now, what's really important to say is, of course, this absolutely needs to be adapted to every individual and to cultural context. It's not a recommendation of exactly how we should all eat, but it gives us a reference and a guide. And actually, if we start to eat in this plant-forward way, that can actually help. If we would switch to plant-based diets, we would be able to reduce 80% of greenhouse gas emissions related to food. But as I mentioned before, climate change, environmental aspects are very important, but there's much more to our food system. There are other challenges. And so it's important to note that this planetary health plate, this planetary health diet, it didn't actually factor in any of the social issues that I talked about before. And so if we really want to tackle all of these issues, we need to go beyond just what's on our plate and think about some other things that we can do as individuals. How are we sourcing our ingredients? Are they coming from systems that are sustainable, not just environmentally, but also socially? Are they ethical? What's the condition for the workers? And how can actually food systems be a positive driver of creating sustainable livelihoods in the world? And depending on your context, you might feel that you have more or less opportunity to engage in sourcing in this way, but it's another really important driver for us as individuals to show what sort of systems we want to support. We can also engage with cooking more, and this is a skill that sadly we're tending to lose in our global population as our lives get busier and more automated. But the more we can return to the kitchen and connect with the actual act of nourishing ourselves and understanding where our food comes from, I think that can be a really positive driver of our individual change. And today, when you're cooking and you're chopping up the vegetables, it might be tempting to throw all of those scraps straight into the bin, but actually that's another place where you can make a change, because simply composting our organic scraps can play such an important role in closing nutrient loops in food systems, because right now all these foods come into cities and all the nutrients are lost there, when actually these are nutrients that could go into producing food if we could get them back into the system. As an individual, you might be lucky enough to be able to vote, and through your vote as a citizen, you can influence food systems where you live. And as a person engaged in this world, you always have to think about, how am I using my time and my energy and my money and my skills? And am I using these in a way that are aligned with my values and that support the food system that I want to see in the future? And I think for some people, when they start to think about this, they realize, well, I don't want to just act as an individual. I want to engage in collective action. Maybe I even want to devote my profession to building more sustainable food systems. And that's where we need to think about working beyond the individual and at different levels. That might look like, for example, engaging with the government to craft policies that incentivize sustainable, ethical, and healthy production systems and disincentivize others that go in the other direction. Or making sure that policies are coherent so that we actually look at the whole system and try and drive it the direction we want to go. You might want to engage with reshaping how food is priced so that we can start to weave in some of these externalities and hidden costs that are currently there, but not being integrated into the price that we pay at the supermarket or wherever we buy our food. Or maybe you want to work for a large industry actor and try and drive their actions across the value chain to be more sustainable. There's literally an endless number of opportunities that you can engage with here. And I'm really happy to say that at the World Food Systems Center, these are some of the topics that we engage with researchers and partners to try and move the systems change forward. And while moving the system forward, I think something that can be really helpful as some guiding principles actually come from agroecology. And agroecology is a term you might associate with agricultural production that integrates ecological principles to make it more sustainable. And yet this concept can actually be applied at a much bigger scale. It can be applied not just to farming systems, but to food systems, and to help us redesign them in a way that they are sustainable and healthy for both people and the planet. That means, for example, integrating diversity, not just into the fields, which can help create more resilient production systems, but making sure that transfers onto our plate, because a diverse diet is helpful for human health as well. And there are plenty of other principles here. What I think is important to say is that these are all looking to nature for inspiration into how we design our systems, and see us not as disconnected from nature, but human beings as an integral part of natural systems. And what I'm saying here is not new. These are concepts that, although maybe they've been nicely structured in an international process a couple of years ago, these are concepts that Indigenous cultures, Indigenous populations have been integrating into how they work with food and how they see themselves as a part of nature since the beginning of time. And it's really important that we start to look to these sources of wisdom and integrate them how we look forward in our food systems. So to think more about some of these aspects that you see here, I'm going to hand over first to Lynn, who's going to look more at some of the social topics, and afterwards to Akanksha, who's going to look more at some of the environmental aspects. And I'll be here later in case you have any questions, but I wish you a wonderful cooking together this evening. Thank you.
So I'm going to start, Michelle. Thank you. I'm going to start exactly where you started with the phases of the food system. I mean, these millions of farmers who are producing food every day, every year. And I mean, it's not only hard labor, right? It's unpredictable, risky business. Often you find these farmers rather towards the bottom of the income ranking than on the top. And it's about 570 million farms worldwide. And I mean, most of these 700 these farms and these farmers are producing not for the global market. They're producing for their own consumption or for local markets. And those that are, let's say, lucky and are able to export their goods for in commodity trading, they faces long and often quite complicated value chains like the one you see here, in multiple steps with multiple entities. And we'll talk about local food today, and local meaning then Swiss. But chances are maybe high that you, in the course of this day, had a cup of tea, maybe you had a cup of coffee, or some chocolate, or bananas or other fresh fruits. And these are typically commodities that are produced in low-income countries and sold in high-income countries. For instance, like Switzerland. And this is, of course, a great opportunity for farmers to participate in international trade. But for smallholder farmers, it also comes with challenges. And one of the challenges is, are smallholders or are able to negotiate fair contracts and good prices? Are unorganized smallholders able to deal with changing or price fluctuation or changing policies? And also there's an issue. It's not always easy to meet regulations or standards of international markets. So those are all challenges that smallholder farmers in low-income countries are facing. And the question is then, what can be done? How can trade and commodity trade particularly be done on a more fair and just fundament? And how can we ensure that farmers are actually benefiting from this system? And I'm sure you have all seen this label before, fair trade label. And this is one mechanism that is well known in terms of trying to increase farmers, the price that farmers receive for their goods. It's also a mechanism that focuses on giving a fair trade premium that can be invested towards social goals, or give farmers access to credits. And it tries to then ensure that farmers are part of a longer term trading relationship. And to be part of this, farmers then have to fulfill certain environmental and social standards. And this started as, let's say, a grassroots movement, and has grown. It's about 1,700 producer organization that is currently participating in this scheme. And this has advantages. Farmers are getting a higher price for their produce. It also makes consumer on the other end of the chain more aware of these standards, these requirements, and maybe also the difficult conditions that some of these farmers are producing under. However, it's not a silver bullet, and it is, let's say, critical voices and skeptics are drawing attention to big question marks. And one of these question marks are, we pay an extra price for these products, but is that price that we pay extra actually reaching the farmers? Well, to a very little extent. The price also covers the certification scheme itself, toll and other issues. And studies have been conducted on finding the impact of the scheme, and it has an impact on income, but on other social goals, the impact is not found, or is not that clear, such as education or health outcomes. It is also known that there is an oversupply. In many parts of the world, the demand for fair trade produce is low. In Switzerland, it's among the highest. We contribute about 100 francs a year per person for fair trade products. This is a lot lower, for instance, in our neighboring countries. So yeah, low demand and oversupply is an issue. And then comes the question, What about the farmers who cannot, for some reason, participate in such schemes? Maybe farmers that are even poorer. Are we harming them? Is this posing a challenge for them to even enter the market? So there are question marks. And my question or challenge to you to think about while you're cooking and think about while you're eating afterwards, perhaps, is what would be an alternative model for trade? What is a good model that benefits the farmer, that puts the farmer at the center and still are able to fulfill environmental and social requirements? Is it or could it be direct trade? There are many schemes that are looking at buying or making the value chain much shorter, and buying and bringing producer and consumers together. Is this an option? What about trying to focus on organization of producers and cooperatives? Is that the way to go forward? Or is it something else altogether, a complete new model? I'd be very excited to hear about your ideas and your alternative thinking around these models for the future. And please post comments and ideas in the chat. It'd be great to hear your thoughts. And that was my food for thought. So I'm going to hand over to Akansha to look more on the environmental side.
Thanks a lot, Lynn. And thank you everyone for being here. So hello everyone. So we heard earlier from Michelle about how agriculture is one of the human activity that is causing the largest negative consequences on the environment, such as loss of biodiversity, deforestation, loss of fresh water. And traditional agriculture, agroecological practices can actually help us in combating some of these challenges. And intercropping is one such agroecological practice. Intercropping, what is intercropping? So intercropping is simply growing more than 2 or 3 crops in the same piece of land at the same time, or at a time when crops are overlapping. And it really works by the power of plants really helping one another through soil or through beneficial organisms. So here I would like to give you a short example of what it could look like. So this is an example of a semi-intercropping system in semi-arid region where they grow a shrub with cereals such as millet. And these shrubs have more deep taproot systems, so they can access water more below underground than the cereal, which has more shorter roots. And so these shrubs can actually provide water to the millets. And without these would be unable to access this. So this leads to better optimization of natural resources like water in this instance. And intercropping can even lead to more economic resilience for the farmers because they are often not just dependent on one crop for profit. They're growing multiple crops. And there have even been studies that have compared monocultures and intercropping systems and have found that overall farmers' income and productivity could increase by 30% in intercropping systems compared to monocultures, while at the same time using 23% less land. So here we also see how there is more optimization of land resources that can occur by such a practice. Of course, intercropping is also a traditional practice, and one of the biggest challenges is that it is tough to scale to very large-scale commercial farmers, and it can be labor intensive. So the challenge now is really how do we improve these practices, or how do we optimize them that they can be applied at a large scale? But just coming back to your menu today, how does intercropping look like on your plate today? So today we are eating beans, and beans are legumes, and legumes are awesome. They're amazing crop species. Why is it so? Well, because they can fix their own nitrogen. So they can interact, they have these bacteria in their roots, and they interact with nitrogen in the air, and they fix it and they can use it as fertilizer. And not only that, they attract pollinators, they improve soil quality, they give this nitrogen to non-legumes, and they are also high in complex nutrients, so they are good for our nutrition. And they also reduce input costs for farmers by less reliance on fertilizers, so they are also profitable. So I would just end by saying that if including more legumes and beans in our diets is one small step towards a sustainable food eating. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Monica, who will talk about the food lab and all the food that we are going to eat. Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you, Akanksha, for your food for thought. Let me share as well my screen. Sorry, this always takes a bit of time, but we're almost there to start cooking. And I hope you are excited. I am. I saw already in the chat some are getting hungry, so we won't keep you waiting. And it's actually now time to cook your way towards sustainable food systems after you hopefully got inspired with some food for thoughts on different aspects and as well an introduction into sustainable food systems. So just so you know, we actually filmed the cooking. So we have a movie for you that we will share. And this is for different reasons, because this movie allows you to cook in your own time. Some of you are a large team. Some of you are maybe students that still need to do their groceries or clean the kitchen to make sure that everything is ready to cook. But also it allows Susan from TASTELAB, who will guide the cooking, to answer any questions you have. While cooking live, that will be a bit challenging, but in this way, she can really answer any questions you have. And she already started in the Q&A actually answering some of the questions that you have pending. So have a look as well. Sometimes the same question is asked twice. So have a look at the questions that are asked, because that might help you as well with some similar questions you are having. Yeah, we originally planned actually this event physically because we wanted to make sure that we cook all together. There is a pandemic, so now we all cook in two different places, but we are very curious to see where you are cooking actually and how this is. So we created a mood board. We've never used a mood board with such a large group before, so let's see how it works. But we're really curious to see your adventures in the kitchen. So in a second, Michelle will share two links in the chat. One is the movie to guide you cooking, and the other is the mood board where you can upload any pictures of your team or yourself cooking and having fun in the kitchen with the recipes we shared with you. So just to guide you a little bit, we will stay in the Zoom, so please keep the Zoom open. We will mute ourselves. We will be available through the Q&A, so you can keep on asking any questions you have, either on the cooking or on any of the food for thought inputs that you heard before. And around 5 to 8, just before we end the Zoom, we'll have a mindful eating exercise for you ready to join, and then we'll leave the Zoom and you can continue cooking as you wish. Yeah, but any questions you have, please ask them on the Q&A, and we will be here in Zoom really guiding you and helping you. So you'll have the recipe to guide you through the cooking. You have the video to see visually what steps to go through. And then you have us to answer any questions you have. So without further ado, let me give the floor to Susan Tobler from TASTELAB, who will introduce the very tasty recipe you'll cook today.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Sue from TASTELAB, and we're an ETH spin-off, which is all about cooking and science. And we also have a new focus on sustainability. Since 2016, we create pop-up events, caterings, as well as digital content to show you how deeply food and science are interlinked. And this not only if you think about high-end molecular gastronomy, but just as much at home in your own kitchen and your own frying pan. So for this event, I was asked to translate all these fantastic scientific inputs we just heard about into a tangible 3-course menu you can cook at home. We do this, we achieve a low carbon footprint by choosing a local, seasonal and fully vegan menu, as you've already heard. We reuse some of the ingredient multiple times to avoid food waste as much as we can. And also we show you with aquafaba, the bean water, how you can use an ingredient which maybe so far you have thought of as a waste product. You've already received the whole menu, so you could shop for the ingredients. And now we recommend that you read through the recipe sheets and also watch through the entire video, which is only 11 minutes long, to familiarize yourself with the dishes. And then you can go back to the video and go back in at your own speed if you need it. In the video, the courses are shown one after the other, but obviously cooking, if you want to have everything ready at the same time, I wouldn't suggest you go from one after the other, but to do it parallel, especially the things in the oven can be done at the same time or almost at the same time. Or of course, if you're a team, delegate amongst your kitchen team members. And as we said, we will stay here online and answer all your questions through the question and answer tool. And I wish you now happy cooking. And yeah, I'm very, very happy to be here and be able to share this experience with you.
Hi there. I'm just unmuting myself briefly because there's a question that frequently comes up. You have 2 tools to really help you to get through and cook a wonderful meal tonight. That is both the recipe that you received on email, and that actually has really detailed instructions. I actually used mine, as you see, because I cooked the dish yesterday. But there you see for each menu which steps to go through. So what you need on the left and on the right, the steps you go through. So those are very detailed instructions. And then you have the video to kind of guide you visually and help you to see how it should look like in the end when you make it. Yeah. So if you don't have the email, you can always contact us, contact me. I'll send my email now in the chat and I'll send you the recipe again. Yeah, have fun.
Hello, everyone. I hope the cooking is going along well. We're here also cooking, so if you want to see ours. A little bit of pre-work. A lot of people have asked about roasting the carrots. So it takes 40 minutes. I think it's a bit hidden in the recipe, depending on the size of your carrots, between 30 and 40 minutes. So you want them kind of soft, but not mushy. So you still want to be able to make nice ribbons. We just talked about making or cooking carrots this way. What's very interesting, obviously from the color, it looks a bit like salmon, and obviously on the blini it very much looks like salmon. But the interesting fact is, once you try it, you'll realize that smoked salmon, depending which quality you buy, tastes a lot of salt, and smokiness. So if the carrots are highly salted, and then if you use a product which is smoked, so either smoked salt or a smoked paprika, you can really mimic the flavor of a graved salmon but in a vegan way. So can you continue cooking and keep asking us questions? We're happy to answer anything, and we'll pop in back and see how it goes. Hello, you all, it's me again. We in our kitchen are now up to the main course, but don't worry at all. We have people saying they were afraid they were out of sync or not fast enough or anything. That's not the point at all. And that's also the reason we decided to do this via a pre-taped video and not do it live. We've seen there are people cooking, some cooking on their own, so they have to prepare everything on their own. Others are in a group of 6. So people cook in very different speeds. And I've cooked on a lot of events with a lot of people. And one issue is always that people cook at very different speeds and chat with each other and just don't do the same thing at the same time. But again, this is not an issue at all. You cook at your speed, you eat whenever you are ready. And there's absolutely no need to keep up or try to be in sync. Again, we're still here for questions, so pop in and ask anything you want to know. Also questions obviously around sustainability of food in general, not just about the menu. And yeah, hope you like the dishes you've created.
Hi everyone, just jumping back on here for one last time, and that's to guide you through a nice activity to end our session together. So I'm just going to share my screen and just inviting you to sort of take a pause. Perhaps you're still cooking and you're going to take a little break. Perhaps you are about to eat and sitting down. What we wanted to take a couple of moments to do with you is a simple mindful eating exercise. And mindfulness is a really nice practice because it helps us to stay down, to calm down, slow down, to bring ourselves into the present moment and just become more aware of what is actually happening right now. And I personally think this is a beautiful practice to also help us become more intentional with not only how we eat, but how we engage with a lot of things in the food system. So let's do this practice together. If you want to find a seat in the kitchen or stand up next to the oven, wherever works for you. Once you've found a comfortable seat or a comfortable place to stand, just take a few moments to take a few nice, long, deep breaths. Letting yourself settle, calm down from the excitement of the cooking. And at the end of the next exhalation, just take a moment to look at what's on your plate in front of you, maybe what's still cooking in the oven. And just reflect on where those ingredients came from. What resources were needed? What people were involved? And then just take a moment of gratitude for everything that went in to all of these ingredients that have made up this meal, including your own effort and time. And now it's a chance to take your first bite of food. But instead of just inhaling it, take one bite at a time. Chew it really slowly, savor it. Perhaps you can notice the flavors or the textures. Let's take a little bit longer to chew each mouthful, a few more times than you normally would. Becoming very aware of those flavors and sensations as you eat. And now maybe you want to put your fork down, take a few more nice deep breaths. And we would like to wish you and all of your cooking and eating mates a delicious and enjoyable meal, whether you're eating that now or maybe in 1 hour's time. We really hope you enjoy it. And I would love to just take a moment to thank everybody that made this event possible. Obviously, Sue, who came up with these beautiful recipes and cooked them for you so you could have some guidance, to Lynn Akanksha, who offered some great insights, to Jamila and the whole Student Sustainability Commission for their inputs. And last but not least at all, Monica, who did an incredible job making this event from an in-person concept to an online concept and really ran around connecting all of us and bringing all the pieces together. So we can all give Monica a round of applause in our kitchens. And with that, we're going to leave you to eat your meal. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you had a really enjoyable time. We loved cooking with you and loved watching the mood board. So don't forget to upload your photos there and have a look through at what's happening in all the other kitchens around the world. Thanks, everybody. Wishing you lots of joy and find some purpose in your sustainable eating and cooking as you go forward. We hope to stay in touch, and feel free to follow us at World Food System Centre if you want to join more events or get any more information on these things. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.